Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Go to the link right here in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge. This is the best place for heat, information, conversation, and consternation. Make sure that you check it out. Before, during, after the games, middle of the night, they're still going. This is the place to go. It's Off the Floor. Click on the link right here in the description. $2.99 per month. Also, check out the great sponsor of the Five Reasons Sports Network. This one is free to join. It's called Prize Picks. Not only is it free, but down $5 and you get $50 to play right away. Go to prizepicks.com. Got to make this season interesting somehow, so get your plays in every night. You can play it across the sports spectrum. Of course, you can play the Heat players, up to 6 players together. And if you get them right, you win. That's how this works. You get the money right away. No catch. PrizePicks.com. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Mercy. Luxurious. Heat Nation. Yeah. Mercy and Lago. Down to Biscayne. Yeah. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs. Down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I want to apologize for this in advance. Brady has already done this on Off the Floor. Before you get to this episode, you may want to listen to the Kevin Durant episode that Alex and I did, basically, because we need content. But we talked about whether or not it still makes sense for the Heat to go after KD based on what we've seen here over the past few weeks. But today, we've been talking about this episode for a while. And over the course of time that we've talked about it, we've actually made this more difficult because we've added losses to the list. The Miami Heat have blown a ton of double-digit game leads this season. Most recently against Charlotte, which was 17 points against a team that had not won a division game the entire season, and they lost that one at home. Brady, Alice, and I have sat there and watched these leads dissipate on a nightly, whenever the Heat play at home basis. A lot of you have watched them with us on playback.tv/5RSN, where we stream the home and the road games. And here's all I want to say about this before we sort of start to rank these, and I don't know actually how we do it. The loss to me that was the worst of the entire season doesn't even make this list that was compiled by @WadeXFlash on Twitter. This Twitter user has been compiling these game after game after game. Let me give you his list. And actually, this was posted. Like I said, these have to be constantly updated. It's like the stock market because there's always a new one. He did this on March 8th. This is before the loss to the Hornets. So that one has to be added to this. That was a 17-point lead choke to the Hornets. Here's his list, Brady, and then we'll go through which are your favorites. 25-point lead choke to the Magic. Remember, that wasn't even like the complete Magic. That was the Magic without their two best players. I think like three of their best four players, actually. 21-point lead choke to OKC. Okay, that happens. I mean, you knew they were going to lose that game. They could have been led by 60. 19-point lead choke to the choke to the Knicks, which just hurts because it's the Knicks. 17-point lead choke to the Bulls again, because they're actually lower on this list as well. That one just happened. 17-point lead choke to the Kings. That was earlier in the season. 15-point lead choke to the Bucks. 15-point lead choke to the Suns. 14-point lead choke to the Lakers. 13-point lead choke to the Knicks again. 13-point lead choke to the Clippers. Oh, just in time for them to arrive tonight. 13-point lead choke to the Bulls. 11-point lead choke to the Celtics. And as we know, the Hornets one has to be added to this 17-point lead choked to the Hornets. A couple of things jump out to me about this list. There are some good teams on here. In those cases, you're going to lose some games to good teams when you're not a great team yourself, even when you have a lead. But it's just the sheer volume of these. It's the way that they've happened in a lot of the same ways. They just get out of sorts offensively. Sometimes there's a lot of Terry Rozier. Sometimes there's not. Lately, it's been like you get the game sort of in position where you can control it at the end, but you don't. Tyler takes a bad shot or makes a bad decision. Bama ends up put in a bad position. Fans end up criticizing the spotations, the Eric Spoelstra rotations. Rinse, repeat, regret. I'll just ask you this because, again, to me, what was the worst loss, the most deflating loss of the season is not even on this list, and I'll get to it later. Is there one of these that you came out of it saying they're just never going to figure this out?
Not just because it's the obvious one, but the Magic game to me, just because the stuff you mentioned with the fact that they had nobody playing, they were up 25 and they were up 22 going into the fourth quarter against that team. Up 22. You cannot hold a 22-point lead for 12 minutes. And I think it happened quicker than that. Like, I think they actually got back into the game quicker than the entire 12 minutes. That one was just pretty bad. I mean, that was kind of like the opener for what was to come with all these blown leads. The funny thing is when you go through how many blown leads there were, there's not many times I remember Miami going up by this many points and leading. And whenever they do start to choke the lead, I don't remember them pulling many of these out. Like if we go through, like, once the game gets out of hand and then it becomes close, they're losing. They are not going to pull it out down the stretch. I know we did the kind of the clutch numbers stuff, but that's kind of the craziest part is that, like, they don't have even, like, I don't remember many, like, even any at this point where they really, like, have, just come through in the clutch and then end up pulling it out. The Magic game to me was bad. The OKC game, I think that is debatable. I know you mentioned that before, because it is OKC, and it felt like we were all waiting for that inevitable turn. Like, we all knew that was 21, deep into that game was pretty significant. But I'll just start there. For now, I'll say the Magic, because first of all, I'll just say I can't believe we're doing this. This is just but
we have to get through this somehow. I mean, I don't have other suggestions. I mean, how many times are we going to break down the same things? That's where I'm at with this point. I mean, we can do like grade pods on every individual player, but everybody knows what the grades are going to be before we do them. I don't know. Like, again, is this cathartic? Is this, are we rubbing it in? Are we twisting the knife? I'm not really sure. I kind of feel like when it's just an avalanche like this, when there's so many bad things that happen, you kind of then start to forget each individual pain point. And I guess that's what I'm hoping for here. But I mean, you mentioned the Magic game. That was just atrocious. But the worst of the blown leads, I mean, it has to be the one we just witnessed. I mean, it has to be, just because look who they just played.
yeah.
I mean, they played a team that's actively, like, trying to lose. And, again, Miles Bridges is a good player. I know there are other issues there. LaMelo Ball is not a good player, in my opinion. The Heat have always controlled him. He shot the ball horribly in that game. They still managed to find a way to lose. But here's the part about it. We know they're losing. Like you said, there is no ability to get these things back under control. There's no resolve. I think that's the key thing. That's where we're at. We can talk about them not having enough talent or anything related to that, and to a certain degree that is true. I know our Sean Rochester has hammered that point, that this isn't really a Spoelstra thing, because again, it's just not a good roster. And we can, again, talk about whether or not this can become a good roster and various players who've disappointed. I want to do a full episode about why everybody's regressed this year. That's because this is not normal for the Heat to have so much regression for so many different players. And one player we talked about having not regressed was Tyler, but he's regressed from pre-All-Star now. So pretty much the only player who hasn't regressed now is Bam, but his regression in the first 2 months of the season kind of sunk this team. So we'll do a full episode on that. But as I go through these, okay, the Knicks game, I can't even remember some of these specifically. I just know it's a torrent of threes on the other side. Teams start hitting threes that they haven't hit at all before. Some of it is bad shots by the Heat that then leads to these runouts, easy opportunities, weird rotations. I will say if we went through these, and I know some on Twitter have done this, Brady. Terry Rozier's played a lot of these fourth quarters, played a lot of minutes in these fourth quarters. I'm trying not to blame it just on him, but this is why Heat fans, I've never seen a scenario like this. And then we'll get back to our list and rank them. I've never seen a scenario like this where Heat fans are convinced that this team is tanking intentionally. I've never seen anything like it. They're not. They're really not. You know you're in a bad place when the fans think so. First thing, it's not what they do, okay? They don't. Spoelstra is not going to go out there and tank games intentionally. It's just not going to happen, okay? But beyond that, like they are. I think it's just a lack of recognition that they just are this flawed. They do lack this much resolve, this much connectivity. And that's where it's at. And there's no point in tanking. Like, okay, everyone's like, oh, tank, go for Cooper Flag. You're not getting Cooper Flag. Okay. And it's too late. There are too many bad teams in the East. They were never going to get below the bottom 4 or 5 in the East. And when Philadelphia totally fell apart, then that was it. Then that was the other team. You're not going to get the only thing you can do to keep your own pick is to lose the 2 play-in games. Now, if they start throwing Rozier out there for 48 minutes in play-in game 1, then yes, they're tanking. They're trying to get that pick. But anything short of that, that's not tanking. I mean, do you see any scenario where they would tank? Are they tanking, Brady?
Unintentionally right now, that's what it feels like. Like, it doesn't feel like an intentional tank. But unintentionally, like there's no way other to characterize, what we're seeing. You mentioned like I'll just go back to the Hornets loss, for example. Like you were talking about ranking like the worst losses. The reason why that one's not up there for me is I feel like a lot of Heat fans, and honestly, I felt this way too, was like almost have given up with it, where it's like that one didn't even phase us. Like that I was unfazed about that one just because I expected it. And just because at the point of the season we're at, that one was just that I was numb to that one. I could move on past that one. And also the other reason is because there is an embrace of trying to get a higher pick now. It almost feels like that's kind of the turn of the season right now. But as you said, I don't think it's really going to change. I mean, maybe they could bump up a slot or two where they get in, get in on a guy maybe they weren't able to, with 2 slots down. But other than that, it's not going to be a major change. So knowing this team, and I know I'm going to sound crazy saying this, the worst thing they're probably going to end up doing is they're going to keep doing this. They're going to keep blowing leads. Then they're going to find a way to win 2 play, like a play-in game or 2. So like that's probably what we're heading toward. Like that's just the inevitability of this team. But no, I don't think they're intentionally tanking, but I think that's why there's more of a worry. If they were intentionally tanking, I don't think there'd be as much of chaos and worry about this team. But the fact that they're like trying to win games and actively getting these big leads, it's just like it just hurts more. Nobody really can figure out what the solution is, including them when you ask them.
Well, Brady, they are getting the leads. So you made the point there. If they were intentionally tanking, they would not be getting leads against the Knicks, against OKC, against the Bucks, against the Clippers. I mean, they would not be against the Knicks again. Like they would not be getting double-digit leads if they're intentionally. If they're incapable of anything, they would not be getting these leads. These teams are not coming down and laying down and saying, "Okay, we'll get them in the fourth quarter." Now there may be. They go into the 4th down against the Heat, and I'm sure the coaches are saying, well, look, okay, we can get them. Okay, just frazzle them, get them out of their offense a little bit. They'll stop rotating the way that they're supposed to rotate defensively. They'll stop getting back. They'll get in their heads. They'll start missing shots. Like I understand, like coaches will be saying that to their teams at this point, but they're not going into games. Other teams are not going into games saying, let's get down 17 in the 3rd and then figure it out. Like that's not happening. The Heat are playing well enough to take these leads against these teams. They're playing largely the same players in the 4th quarter that they played throughout. Now we have had issues with Spoelstra's rotations, particularly sort of the end of 3rd, early 4th this year. Early 4th has been there's been some lineups out there that've been like, wait a second, what's he doing and why is he keeping him out there that long? But ultimately, the closing lineup, he gets to at least 3 of the players we want to see out there. The other 2 are changeable, but Bam and Tyler are going to be on the floor at the end of these games. Now, again, we can argue about whether or not they should be out there earlier, but they're going to be out there. So, again, it's not like they're doing what I saw, say, Utah do here. Utah came here a couple of years ago, and they were playing too well. They didn't want to play that well. They wanted to get higher up. And then everybody who had played well in the first three quarters did not play the fourth. Like the Heat are not doing that. That's tanking. That's from management down. And then it's not like the players are tanking because the players don't tank. Okay, they're out for themselves, which they should be. But the wrong players, the wrong combinations are put out there so that you tilt the scales. That has happened in the past. The Heat are not doing that. The Terry Rozier thing is mystifying to me. Why he's played him so much this season when it was clear it wasn't going right. But that's not the reason for it. All right, on the other side of this, we will rank these because my worst loss of the year, and to me the most deflating loss of the year, isn't even on this list. But I'm going to have Brady to go through some of the rest of these. Before we do, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, our friends over at All Pro Construction Builders. You can find them at allproconstructionbuilders.com. Quality is their specialty. Danny doesn't tank, okay? Danny and his family, his team there, they don't tank. They can't because they're trying to protect your windows, your doors, your house, your place of business, because it's always hurricane season here. I mean, not officially yet, but we're getting closer to it as the months pass. So make sure you get this done now. You don't want to be, I don't have my place protected in August. Too late by then. Okay, 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Allproconstructionbuilders.com. Call Danny directly at 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. Most deflating loss of the two most deflating losses of the season here aren't even on here. Okay. The first one was when Spoelstra called the timeout he didn't have. That was the Detroit game. They lost both games in Detroit, and I really feel like they played a part in the Pistons turning the corner this year. They're not catching the Pistons. They're like 6-7 games behind. Whatever happened this season, if you told people they're going to be almost double-digit games behind the Pistons at this stage of the season, with where the Pistons have been for the last 10 years, and all the Pistons really did was they brought in a couple of vets, Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, players that other teams did not want, okay, and Malik Beasley, right? He's had a good year for them. They brought in these guys, these vet guys. I was wondering, like, why are they doing this? Their progress stopping some of their young players. It's worked, okay? But it's also worked with them hiring a coach who actually was removed in Cleveland, and the guy who replaced him in Cleveland, Kenny Atkinson, replaced J.B. Bickerstaff, is going to end up being coach of the year. So it's not like they brought in a coach that everybody wanted. And yet they beat the Heat twice, both times. Once, okay, when Spoelstra called a timeout that he didn't have, and the other time when Jimmy had the last sort of brilliant game that he's had over the course. They blew those two games down the stretch too, Brady. They didn't have the huge leads, the double-digit leads, but they blew those two games. And the other one for me that comes in here that's just the most depressing loss of the season is the one I missed because I was away with my daughter, and you and Alex texted me and said it's over. And that was the Indiana game at home that Jimmy walked to the corner and then lost his joy. So I'm just saying the three most depressing losses for me are not even the blown lead losses. And that just tells you what a bleep show of this season it's been.
I'm going to add one more to the non-blown lead list, which
Fantastic.
There was the game against Portland where they were down like 20. I think it was exactly 20 going into the fourth quarter. It was like during the Jimmy saga, so it was like late January. But just because it was Portland and I'm pretty sure that game was at home. It was at home, and Joe Cronin was in the building courtside, and they were down 20 going into the fourth quarter. And then they followed that up by losing, getting killed by Dame and the Bucks. So they had a back-to-back game of losing to Joe Cronin and then Dame, which kind of summed up, their season. But I'll say among the blown leads, get back to the originals, because everybody obviously wants to hear about these blown leads and really get these breakdowns, The one that I remember specifically was the Kings game being bad because they lost in double overtime, but they totally had that game in hand. And I was looking at the minute distribution because it was double overtime. And I did happen to see Terry Rozier played 41 minutes. So I just want to say that. But that was...
What was another of those games where he didn't change the rotations in the overtime, right? That we were arguing. Was that the game that Jovic There was a game that Jovic and Duncan were not had played well in the game, but couldn't get on the floor at the end. Was that one? They all run together for me at this point.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was this. I mean, Jovic with 12 points on 3 of 8 shooting. Duncan at 8 points
Mhm.
on 2 of 7 from 3. So I don't know if that was the game where they were playing extremely well, but I know they weren't. They didn't get in the game late. They didn't play an OT or double OT. Uh, yeah, that one was not great. Just because I felt like that was another one of those they had the game in hand and they just the Kings kind of snuck their way into overtime. Yeah, so I'd add that one to the list. Honestly, I'd put the Bulls game over the Hornets game as of late.
Mhm.
From at least from the ones from recently, just because that one felt like the game where I said to myself during like the Hornets game, I really said to myself, okay, anything can happen. They could lose this game. At this point, it is what it is. The Bulls game, I said to myself sitting there at that arena, they're not losing this one. I really think this is the game. They'll get this one and get out of here with a win. Yeah, they didn't. That didn't happen. So like getting outscored, what was it, by 16 in the fourth quarter against the Bulls, and just having like once again, a lot of these teams are not healthy that they're playing and having this happen
Right,
to. Like just
right.
because this game, I think the Heat did have Wiggins in that game, but there was a couple games where maybe were missing guys. Obviously, they don't have Jovic. They didn't have like a majority of their players, like Lonzo Ball, Vucevic, Ayodesumu.
Mhm.
Like they had so many injuries, and this continues to happen. It doesn't really matter. Honestly, I think I worry more when teams have
Yeah.
their main guys not playing right now than if they do. I thought they played honestly like the Timberwolves game to me won't make this list. They played them pretty well throughout, and when a team has their best players, it feels like they actually can get into a battle and scheme up something defensively.
Mhm,
But when they
mhm.
cannot focus on a guy like Anthony Edwards or Julius
Yeah.
Randle, when it's a team like the Bulls where there's just guys just going and playing basketball, I don't think I worry about that game. I just don't think they have the ability to stop those type of runs.
There's very few games this year, you're right, where the star on the other team just went crazy. Karl Anthony Towns is the one that jumps out to me from early in the season, that Knicks game. But the majority of the stars against them have not put up the crazy numbers. They haven't. You're right. They have had an ability to focus on that. But when things start getting away, it doesn't matter who's on the other team. That's kind of where we're at this point. It really doesn't matter. They're not going to guard anybody, and they're not going to make their shots. There's going to be long rebounds. There's going to be weird decisions. There's going to be turnovers. And it's pretty much can be any NBA player on the other side who's taking advantage of it. And I think as we close here, the most frustrating part for me is just seeing the absolute lack of composure for this team this year. I don't think it's lack of effort. They have no ability to stop anything. And I know people are going to say, this was the Jimmy thing. We've talked about that. Look, Jimmy was the one guy who could get to the line, stop the clock. Fans in Golden State are talking about this. Nobody said Jimmy was a bad basketball player or didn't help the Heat. He does. I guess and we're going to do a full episode on what Jimmy's done in Golden State. But I guess I'm surprised that the bottom fell out to the degree it did, only because I've seen the Heat play competent, composed basketball without Jimmy while Jimmy was still on the roster. And that's what I was talking to you about when we left the arena the other day. They have done it at times, okay? They had a 500 record without him when he was on the roster. But this, what are they, 4-11 coming into tonight? I guess since the trade, it feels like psychologically something that either they weren't ready, Tyler maybe in particular, for the moment to kind of move up a slot, or maybe knowing Jimmy's not there to help them, they get panicked. I'm not sure what it is, but it's definitely different. It's worse. It's much worse than it was when he was on the roster, and they have a better roster than they did on the nights he was here, but wasn't playing. Right? You have added Wiggins. You have added Davion Mitchell. I mean, Rozier would be playing 40 minutes a night if they hadn't acquired Davion Mitchell. Okay, he would be playing 40 minutes a night because they don't have Drew Smith anymore. And it's just like that's been the most frustrating thing for me is like watching the bottom fall out of this when I don't they haven't been this bad before. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
I really do believe the free throw thing is one of the most important things of the whole like blown lead thing.
Yeah.
They're dead last. So specifically March when they've had like at least every game been a blown lead. They're dead last in free throw attempts. Like that matters. Like when you're talking about having a 17 to 20 point lead and trying to sustain it late in the game, you cannot play at the speed of the other team where they just want to run off points and play on the break and keep it flowing. you have to slow things down. You have to like try to get to the line, make them play, inbound the ball, play into the half court, do all of that type of stuff. You cannot let them get. It feels like how many times have I looked at the stat sheet after a game and like the second half, uh, transition points are always so high because they start upping the pace in the second half, and Miami has no way of stopping the pace. Like they do not like as much as we talked about. Guy Jimmy's one of them. Kyle did it a ton, but like different guys like that where they controlled the pace of the game, where like they could just totally change the trajectory of how you want to play the game. They just don't have that guy. It almost feels like I asked Bam about it, in the last game. It almost feels like Miami plays into the speed of the other team. Like when these leads start happening, like they start playing as fast as the other team. And it's like you shouldn't be doing that. Like they want you to do that. They want to keep playing at this speed. And that was what Jimmy would do a lot of times in the past when they would have those lead was get to the line, slow things down, and that's how you sustain a lead. But not being able to do that and chucking threes, and we see the regression a lot of times in the second half from deep. Hard, long rebounds going the other direction, and all of a sudden the 17-point lead is an 8-point, and then Spo's calling a timeout. And how many times I'll mention this as well, because how many times have we seen them come out of a timeout, like at these points in the game, and something goes wrong out of the timeout? That's another reason why people must see
Backcourt
it.
violation against Charlotte. The backcourt
Exactly. That's
violation
the
against
one I was
Charlotte was a
thinking of.
killer.
It's happened many times where I'll like see them come out of a timeout and something goes horribly wrong. And that's usually like the turning point of the game. Because it's like, if you can't settle in after your timeout to, draw something up, settle in a nice possession, where you don't even get a look up, where it's just an immediate backcourt violation. There's been a lot over this recent stretch. That's just a problem in itself.
On other teams, I think we'd be saying that the players are tuning out the coach. I don't think that's necessarily what's happening here. It's like they're not processing the coach. Or maybe the coaches just doesn't have a handle on this team. It's a combination of all of it, I think. But I don't feel like they're. I watch them in the huddles; they're listening to him. Then they come out, and they look like they didn't hear a thing he said. It's amazing. I would say that's what my daughter does to me, but I don't know. She'd say that's what I do to her. All right. Anyway, Brady, I appreciate it. I don't think anybody else is going to appreciate this at all. But suffer with us. Playback.tv/5RSN. Be there tonight. The reactions have gotten more and more amusing there, actually. So join Matt, Ray, Adele, Eternal if he decides to show up. They'll all be there on Playback tonight. Have a good one.